Okay. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can also see your nose and mouth, which we shouldn't be able to see.
Nose and mouth, no, but
You should have a
Don
mask on. You're with real
told me I'm
people.
allowed to take it off. I don't know if Don, writes the laws for the country.
How far are people away from you?
Everyone is far away from me, and Don says, Misrad HaChinuch says it's okay.
They say a lot of things. As
They
long
say
as
a
they're
lot of
very far
things.
away from you, it's good.
All right. I don't know. I'm just doing what I'm told. All right. We're gonna do this thing. It's showing on a screen, and it's also I'm looking at you on the computer. If we had had a second laptop, it would have been possible for me to look at the screen, and it's a little easier on the eyes. Yeah, but when I turn, I'm not looking at the people on Zoom. All right. Oh,
Hi, Kayla.
Don is saying, what just happened? Oh, okay, the screen is being adjusted and people are moving and people want the people on Zoom to be able to see them. Okay, Microsoft Edge, Zoom Cloud Meeting. I'm looking for, here's the text. Okay. Okay. I'm getting the text set up. Now we need to reduce it slightly. We'll make this 275. Oh no, that was not good. Okay. Okay. We are ready to start. We are ready to start. I guess I can't see people and pictures at the exact same time. I can't see the text and the people at the same exact time. All right. Last week we started a very basic and important text of Rav Kook regarding that which the people of Israel shares in common with the nations of the world, and that which the Jewish people has, which is unique. The first one is the physical level of life. It's health and prosperity and statecraft and law and order and court systems and economics and productivity. Okay, everything, also the army, anything and everything that is necessary for a country to function, that the Jews have in common with the rest of the world. But there's also the spiritual side. There is the special covenant, and the covenant is not shared traditionally along with the nations of the world. That's something that's unique to the people of Israel. And what Rav Kook said in the passage that we read last week was that for 2,000 years, the Jews have only had the spiritual side. They only developed the spiritual side. Obviously, the physical side was always left to some extent. Jews ate, Jews built houses, Jews gave birth to a new generation and fed their children. Okay, there was some physicality that was left, and yet most of what a people is occupied with in the life of a nation was absent from Jewish life for nearly 2,000 years. So Rav Kook says that the spiritual side is what defined the Jews during the period of exile, and the physical side was mostly missing. In his opinion, that is an unhealthy state of affairs. This all came out in his eulogy to Herzl. In Herzl, we saw last week that he found himself in a kind of a bind. On the one hand, Herzl was a pork-eating, Sabbath-violating Jew, and traditionally it's forbidden to give a eulogy for such a person. But on the other hand, Herzl was an extraordinary Jew. Herzl turned to an aspect of Jewish life that was neglected by others and drove it home. He started the movement for a Jewish country, and that is something that Rav Kook deeply believed in. So the means that he found to eulogize Herzl in Jerusalem in 1904 was to sermonize based on the Talmudic idea of not one Messiah, but two. Okay, we have the Messiah of Joseph, and the Messiah, son of Joseph, and the Messiah, son of David. Joseph in the Torah represents physicality, food, statesmanship. That's who Joseph is in the Torah. While David, right, the Messiah of the Lord, and the man who wanted to build the temple, if you look at it in this direction at least, David comes out in this way of looking at things as representing the spiritual side. So Rav Kook takes this idea that there's two Messiahs, Messiah son of Joseph and Messiah son of David. And what he said without explicitly saying it in the text that we read last week is that Herzl was the Messiah. Not the Messiah, son of David, but rather the Messiah, son of Joseph, because Herzl was a statesman. Herzl began this worldly, practical, political movement to build a practical, physical home for the Jewish people. He did not occupy himself with spirituality. He did not care about the Torah life of this new nation. It wasn't central for him. What was important to him was the basic reality of a people living in its land. I shouldn't even say in its land. It could be in any land, right? A people that has a land, even if the land is Uganda. We talked about that last week. That's what we saw on the first side of this, in the first half of this text. We're now going to read the second half of the text, and from there we're going to take it into how these ideas work in the machinery of Rav Kook's mind, and what the relevance of Rav Kook's thought is to this very day. And when I say this very day, I even mean the stuff that's going on in Israeli society right now, and perhaps people can make their own analogies based on their political insights, things that are perhaps going on in the United States or elsewhere in the world. So Rav Kook says this, and I'd be happy if somebody would be willing to read. Would that be possible? I'll put mine on if you can hear. Oh, but if you read, they won't hear you, so I have to read.
You haven't done a share.
Brian, forget it.
You haven't shared the screen.
Shared.
I haven't shared the screen?
No.
You don't see the text?
Nope.
Okay, I'll do share screen if I can find it. Hold on, where's share screen? I found it, share screen. Here's the text. Okay, Ryan, can I just ask you to bring me my water? It's right in front of you. Thanks. Now you see the text?
Yes.
Okay, maybe one of you could read the text on Zoom. Elisheva, Simcha, somebody.
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay.
So it came about that throughout the exile, there is a seesaw effect of these two opposing forces. At times, there is exhibited a drive toward material worldly success that flows primarily from the foundation, I assume, there's something in the way, Joseph and Ephraim. Other times, there is a stirring of the spiritual drive for observance of Torah and spiritual development, for awe and love of God. Since it is impossible for our nation to attain its lofty destiny other than by actualizing these two components, the universal symbolized by Joseph and the distinctive symbolized by Judah, there arise in the nation proponents of each aspect. Those who would enhance spirituality prepare the way for Messiah, son of David, whose focus is the final destiny. Truly, the focus of life is spiritual attainment, except that the spiritual can only develop properly if it is accompanied by all the material acquisitions of which a full-bodied nation is in need. Those who redress the material, general aspects of life prepare the way for Messiah, son of Joseph.
Okay, Elisheva, when it said, just to point this out, when it says that the Messiah, son of David, is the final destiny, what he means is a matter of the means and the ends.
You've lost your voice. Can't hear you.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the Messiah, son of David, is the goal. Okay, one is the means and one is the goal. Now, the nation divides. Some people meet this need and some people are drawn to meet this need. And in general, people don't live in both camps. Okay, go on, please.
When these two forces work at cross purposes as a result of the calamity of exile, short-sightedness and disarray,
Nice.
These are the birth pangs of Messiah, or to be more exact, the birth pangs of Messiahs, plural. The psalmist writes, that your enemies have defied, O Lord, that they have defied the footsteps of your Messiahs, plural. Two footsteps of two Messiahs. Now, since the major achievement of Messiah, son of Joseph, which is the general advancement of mankind, is accomplished by de-emphasis of the unique Jewish form, Messiah, son of Joseph, cannot endure, so he is destined to be killed.
Now, this is important. Okay, the time. What? Do you hear me?
Just barely.
Just barely hear me?
Now it's okay.
Okay. The Talmud says that the Messiah, son of Joseph, is destined to die. Okay? Now he's able to say this at Herzl's funeral. Herzl died. Okay? And he's saying in a deeper way that they're trying to give that Irina's trying to give me a phone with more Zoom. We're going to do it this way though. Thank you. Where was I? The Messiah, son of Joseph, is destined to die. Why? What does that mean? It means that the Jewish people cannot live, cannot endure, cannot survive and continue to live if they only contain that which they share with all the other nations. If they're a nation like any other nation, then they will not endure. Without the spiritual specialness, They cannot live, they cannot endure. That is what the Talmud means by the son of Joseph cannot endure and is destined to be killed. Rav Kook would have it that Herzl, the secularist, begins the Zionist movement, but he does not live to see its fulfillment, because its fulfillment will include elements that go beyond what he represented. Okay?
But
Yeah.
since that side also represents the kind of basic essentials of existence, is he saying we'll be purely spiritual? We won't need to eat anymore?
No, he's not like that at all.
I didn't think so.
He's saying that the spiritual cannot exist without this worldly side. One is the spiritual is more important, it's the goal, but it requires the means. Okay? The Jews cannot exist without that which is shared with all the other nations.
Right.
And yet, that which they share with all the other nations is not sufficient in and of
But
itself.
he says if that side has to die, it would seem to contradict.
No.
Or am I misunderstanding?
Yes, you're misunderstanding just in a very basic way. The Messiah, son of Joseph, is a Messiah, meaning he brings a kind of redemption.
Okay.
He succeeds in bringing that kind of redemption. That kind of redemption endures. Okay?
Okay.
It endures, but it endures as the basis of something higher. Once the Messiah, son of Joseph, has brought the physical redemption, he's no longer needed. He can pass on. Okay? And then the redemption that he has brought can serve as the basis for something even higher.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay? Jenny has a question. I'll repeat it to Zoom. Yeah? Yeah.
And he had somehow not quite met all of, after everything he had done, all the credentials.
Okay. To the best of my understanding, you couldn't hear Jennifer's question, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll repeat all the questions from this room. Jennifer, just last night, I taught a class that I began with the clip of Martin Luther King that how does he say it, that I've reached the mountaintop, right? The speech that Martin Luther King gave on the night before he was, the night before the day that he was assassinated. And what Jennifer asked is that, does this have anything to do with Moses, right? That Moses also, he reaches the mountaintop, but he doesn't see, he brings them to the brink of the Holy Land, but doesn't bring them in. There is a similar feel to it, okay? Although it's not exactly the same thing. If it would be an exact analogy, Moses would bring the Israelites into the land of Canaan, and there, finishing his mission, right, there you would die. It also maybe is not an exact analogy because Moses is more remembered for the spiritual side than for the physical side. And if he was the figure, then he would probably represent both the Messiah, son of Joseph, and the Messiah, son of David. What? Well, yeah, he did something wrong. We don't know exactly what it was. And okay, all right. Let's go on. Bevakasha, Elisheva.
Okay, can you lower this? There's something over the last two words. Thank you. When this happens, all will recognize the perversity of the situation. They will realize that it was wrong not to subjugate the universal dimension to the spiritual aspect, which is Israel's destiny, to the kingdom of David. They will lament him as one laments an only son, and grieve for him as one grieves for the firstborn son. The lamentation for an only child is bereft of hope for future children. Elderly parents who have lost their only son are totally forlorn. If the verse were to end on that note, it would spell utter doom. But the bitterness is mitigated by intellect. Intellect perceives that the nation has produced the soul of the Messiahs. The nation I'm trying to find the line. Here it is. The nation is not as elderly parents who have lost their only child, but rather as young parents who have lost their firstborn child. Being inexperienced at raising children, they did not attend properly to the child in its state of illness, so the child succumbed. That's a rather harsh judgment.
It is a very harsh judgment.
By the
I think that first of all, we should have commented even a little bit on this paragraph. Okay. Yes. That when this happens, all will recognize the perversity of the situation where part of the nation only focuses on one side and part of the nation only focuses on the other side. That, according to Rav Kook, is what happened. That's the reality on the ground. But he says that that is a perverse situation. It should not be like that. Okay? People should be pursuing both the means and the end. You can't pursue the end without the means. And yet to devote your whole life to the means and forget the end is worthless. It's a perverse situation. And when people recognize the perversity of the situation, then they will realize that it was wrong just to focus on the physical, this worldly element of Zionism, rather than to combine it with the spiritual aspect of Zionism. For Herzl, there was no spiritual aspect of Zionism, at least not spiritual in anything other than culture. Okay, and then we have this business here about the children, right? Okay, it's not one Messiah; it's two Messiahs. Okay. These are like parents that have lost their firstborn child. He's talking about the mourning of the Jewish people for Herzl, okay? And he's saying that parents who mourn who mourn the loss of a firstborn child. First of all, there is another child. It's a different kind of mourning when there is another child. And secondly, you said this was very harsh at the end. Being inexperienced at raising children, they did not attend properly to the child in its state of illness, so the child succumbed. But before we address harshness, what does he mean by that? What exactly is he saying? Yeah.
Haven't had experience at setting up a nation, so we may not do it right the first time.
Since the Jew, I couldn't listen to both at once, I'm sorry. When the nation, right, has no experience with combining this world and the spiritual world, that is the inexperience. They make mistakes, okay? And the mistake here is that they adopted a secular Zionism, right? Exclusive of the spiritual side. He'll explain this in the next paragraph, and then I think is the proper place to talk about how harsh this is.
What does he mean by a state of illness?
Exile. Okay? Okay, go ahead, Elisheva.
By the same token, the nation comes to the realization that it did not know how to make proper use of this universalist dimension, did not understand how it could contribute to Israel's unique destiny. In that way, it could have survived. The nation labored under the illusion brought on by the divisiveness of exile, that these two forces are truly at odds. The result is that whatever holds up the universal side of the nation becomes, unfortunately, an enemy of the Torah and mitzvot. Contrariwise, whoever focuses on the uniquely Jewish becomes an adversary of material well-being. In the first scenario, the fence of Torah is broken down. In the second, the result is weakness and morosity. Wow.
If you don't really understand your child, you won't be able to help your child realize full potential. Okay? And this inexperience and this lack of understanding led the children in two opposite exclusive directions that are mutually sick. Okay, he sees sickness both in secular Zionism and in the world of Torah. Brian has a question. Yes. Wow, what a fantastic question. Okay, there are lots of new movements in the time of Rav Kook, both in the world at large and within the Jewish people. Brian asked about one of the movements within the Jewish people, which is something that nowadays is called modern Orthodoxy, which was founded in Germany in the 19th century. In Germany, it was called the Torah im Derech Eretz movement, the movement for Torah together with culture, we would say. Okay, what was meant by that was German culture of the 19th century. You should be fully a Jew and you should be fully a German at the same time. You should keep Torah and mitzvot, and you should be a productive German citizen. You should go to yeshiva and study Torah, and you should go to university and study worldly knowledge. That was the movement that Brian asked. So he's asking, is what Rav Kook describes in this paragraph, the paragraph highlighted right now, is that similar to the movement of Torah im Derech Eretz? The answer is that on the surface, it sounds similar. It does, when you first read it. But there's something about it that is vastly, vastly dissimilar. Okay? Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, who was considered the father of this movement that Brian raised, was an anti-Zionist. Okay? Rav Kook may have seen certain things in this movement that deserved admiration, but he really was not a fan of the movement. And I'm going to explain why. Okay? The reason is that in the first Zionist Congress, somebody help me, 1897, thank you. Okay. What? In Basel. Well, we're going to talk exactly about that. Okay, here is something totally wild. Ladies and gentlemen, here is something totally wild, totally crazy, and totally important. That's even important exactly for the essay that we're reading. I recently heard a wonderful lecture by Shlomo Avineri. Shlomo Avineri is a thinker and a historian. He's a popular and well-known figure in like the intellectual side of Israeli secular Zionism. And he told a story, a great story, a true historical story. Please turn off your telephones beeping. A true historical story about why the first Zionist Congress was in Basel. Herzl said afterwards, as you all know, in Basel, I founded the Jewish state. What a great quote. You know what the competitor to Basel was? What city? Does anyone know? Yeah. You're not going to believe it. Okay? Herzl's first choice, and it was a first choice for a lot of good reasons. It was a more important city. a more central city, a city, you know, that all the railways of Europe would easily bring you to. He wanted to have the first Zionist Congress in Munich. Imagine if the first Zionist Congress had been in Munich, and Herzl had said, in Munich I founded the Jewish state. And then came the Holocaust. Somebody's watching from heaven, and we can ask where he was in the Holocaust, but at least in 1897 he was watching, right, to make sure, right, that Herzl wouldn't say that in Munich I founded the Jewish state, so he could say in Basel I founded the Jewish state. But why? If Herzl wanted it in Munich, why did it end up in Basel? The reason is because of the Jews. There was a Jewish community in Munich, or to be more exact, there were two Jewish communities in Munich. In Munich, there was what was called the Gemeinde, the official German Jewish community. It exists to this very day. That was largely controlled by Reform Jews. There was also something called the Austritt Gemeinde, the outside community, which was the official community of the Orthodox Jews, the kind that Brian was talking about. The Orthodox Jews who say you should be a Jew in German and keep the Torah and have a job and to go to yeshiva and university. Those people controlled the Austritt Gemeinde. The Reform Jews and the Orthodox Jews in Germany had a lot of friction. And there were plenty of things they could not agree on. But there was one thing they were able to agree on. And I bet some of you can already guess what it was. What do you think? They could agree on Zionism. Under no circumstances do we want a Zionist Congress in Munich. We are citizens of Germany. We are not looking for a new country somewhere in the Near East. Okay? Both the Reform German Jews and the Orthodox German Jews were anti-Zionists.
Avi,
Yes.
when you say Reform Jews, they aren't quite the same as the Reform Jews today, are they?
Well, the Reform movement has gone places in 150 years. Things change. The Reform movement today in America is far less elitist, far less cosmopolitan. Well, I don't know if cosmopolitan is not the right word, but it's more open to tradition. Okay, the Reform movement has changed its nature and its character to a great degree. In the many generations.
They were throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah, well, right after World War II, the Reform movement became Zionist.
Yeah.
Okay, but before World War II, the Reform movement was officially anti-Zionist. It's just a fact, and it's not to bang Reform Jews, because the official Orthodox movement in Germany was also anti-Zionist. They both were. Okay.
And there are historical reasons for that.
What?
There were historical reasons for that.
Of course.
It was when Germany opened up the possibility of citizenship provided, and so there was much to be gained.
Correct. You could be a German citizen as long as your being Jewish was confined to the synagogue.
Exactly.
Right?
And you were fully German otherwise.
Correct. Correct. Okay. So yes. So to go back to Brian's question, which I think can enlighten us on a lot of what we're reading now. Okay. Rav Kook, you can now understand, had very mixed feelings about modern German Jewish Orthodoxy. Okay. Why? Because it was a cosmopolitan Orthodoxy. Okay, that, you know, I'm a Jew and I'm a man of the world, and my being a man of the world has nothing to do with the land of Israel. Nothing whatsoever. Okay, anything I may feel about nationhood is reserved, for Germany alone. And that is something that bothered Rav Kook very deeply about this movement. On the other hand, I think I should reply also to Brian's question that the similarity between German modern Orthodoxy and what Rav Kook describes for religious Zionism is evident. And it may be that on a deeper level, German Jewish Orthodoxy had some sparks of religious Zionism in it. And what eventually happened is that all of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch's grandchildren and great-grandchildren became leaders of religious Zionism. They became Zionists a few generations, 2 or 3 generations afterwards. Okay, so there is something there, Brian. Okay, now he's describing in this paragraph the reality. You have 2 camps that are fighting with each other. They're often bitter about each other. Okay, I think that sometimes today, even though we have friction, religious, secular in Israel today, it's not like it once was. Okay, it's not as pivoted. It's not, I don't know how you say kutzvi in English. You know, like what's happening to America nowadays. Polarized, thank you, okay? It's not as polarized today as it once was, okay? A quick story, I may have told it before, I don't remember. It once happened to me, okay? This was in 1984, okay? In 1984, I was a year after high school in Israel. And I took an hour bus ride from the yeshiva where I studied in Kerem to Yerushalayim. And this old woman sat down next to me on the bus. Nobody's nodding their head. Maybe you remember the story. This old woman, it's okay. This old woman sat next to me, an elderly woman sat next to me on the bus. And she starts talking to me in Hebrew. Okay, I was never in Israel really before that year, right? My Hebrew wasn't that great, and I only understood parts of what she was telling me, but it was enough to get the gist of what she was saying. She was talking about the Adukim. Okay, the Adukim was a word a generation or 2 ago for religious Jews. Aduk means to be very strict. Okay, and she says the Adukim are like this, and the Adukim are like that, and the Adukim are taking all the money, and the Adukim are ruining the country, and the Adukim are taking over, and the Adukim are going to tell us what to do, and the Adukim are going to ruin everything. The whole bus ride for an hour, she's going on and on and on and on and on. What? Don said she was prophetic. She's going on and on and on the bus ride, okay? And I'm sitting there listening to her. Like, what choice do I have, right? Finally, at the end of the bus ride, before the bus goes into the old Tachana Merkazit, she goes like this. She puts her hand on me, and she goes like this, and she finds my kippah. Apparently, she couldn't see too well either, okay? And she says, Gam ata aduk. you're also one of them, right? And my Hebrew wasn't that great, but I figured out, what that I understood. So, yeah, it took me a while to figure out what Aduk meant, but after she used it enough, I got the point, and then I got the point at the end of the bus ride. People like that are hard to find in Israel today. Okay? Even the people who are at the forefront of the religious secular friction, they don't talk like that anymore. Okay? So things have changed to a certain degree. But she was a remnant, this woman, of what Rav Kook is describing in this paragraph. Okay? The nation has labored under the illusion brought on by the divisiveness of exile, that these 2 forces are truly at odds. The result is that whoever holds up the universal side of the nation, the statehood and the real world side becomes an enemy of the Torah and mitzvot, right? If you're secular, you hate Torah and mitzvot. My sense is that most secular Israelis today, no matter what things may legitimately irk them, they don't hate Torah and mitzvot. But there really were people who did. And contrary-wise, he says, whoever focuses on the uniquely Jewish, the Torah side, becomes an adversary, get that, an enemy of material well-being. I don't get the sense that in today's Israel, that the religious side is an enemy, get that, an enemy of material well-being. Something has been, I don't know, the tension has been somewhat reduced. Okay, we're getting politics here from the side, are you? There is cigars. And the first thing, okay. And, oh. Yeah. 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 Okay. Jennifer was talking about. Okay, Jennifer is talking about work that she has done or still does. Okay, with Haredi families who don't function, I guess, in the real world and expect society to provide for them. Okay, I don't think this criticism is new to any of us, right? Okay. In any case, I do think that it's still not like it once was. Okay, it depends on the people, right? Okay, let's go on. If Elisheva could continue to read.
After this latest experience of Messiah, son of Joseph's impermanence, let us deduce that truly the two forces are not mutually antagonistic. It is time to bring it all together and to organize the nation's ways. Let every universal perfection serve as a basis for perfecting the uniquely Israelite. Let both parties, those disposed to the material and universal, and those disposed to the spiritual and particularistic, come to the same conclusion. Then the lamentation will be on both sides. Both will recognize their mistake. These two forces were created to be united. Once rent asunder, they were mutually injurious.
Okay, when he says then
I like that.
You like that?
I like that.
Then the lamentation will be on both sides. He's hinting that only one side is mourning for Herzl. And he really thinks it should be both sides. Okay, go on.
The quality of love of nation was exemplified by Ahab. He had such love of Israel. He followed in the ways of his father Omri, who added a city to Israel. Even when pierced through by an arrow, he kept up the pretense so that his troops not be demoralized by the loss of their commander. For this reason, he was assured the world to come. Mine is Gilad. This refers to, how are you supposed to pronounce his name? Ahab?
In Hebrew, it's Achav.
Ahab.
We should say Ahab. There's a reason why that name was chosen for Moby Dick. Okay.
Who fell in Gilad. Such courage comes from a wonderful love. Though on a superficial level, Achav respected Torah, nevertheless, He did not comprehend the value of Torah and its unique divine sanctity, which uplifts Israel. Thus, he followed in the ways of Isabel and the pagan rites practiced by the contemporary nations.
Okay, people who study Bible are very aware of this. That Achav, the king who is destroyed in a moral sense, right? When he wants the field, and so his wife murders the owner. Okay, Kerem Navot, the vineyard of Navot. On a moral level, the Bible castigates him, but Rav Kook realizes that on a national level, he was quite a king. He was a builder of a city, and he was a warrior for his people. Okay, Rav Kook is turning King Ahab into a model of secular Zionism. That's what he's doing in this paragraph. Oh, and one more thing, very important. You can't miss this. For this reason, he was assured the world to come. Rav Kook is saying that the secular Zionist, the person, eating pork on Yom Kippur, okay, is assured a place in the world to come as a builder, as a warrior for his people. Okay, bevakasha.
At the other end, Josiah strengthened the spiritual dimension. In this respect, he was unequaled among kings. Before him, there was no king who so returned to the Lord with all his heart, soul, and might. He would brook no linking of Israel to the nations. This reached an extreme in his refusal to accede to Jeremiah's prophetic demand that he allow the army of Egypt to enter Israel's territory.
So Josiah, Yoshiyahu was a particularistic spiritual king. Okay, he would allow no contact between Israel and the nations, or no violation. Okay.
Clearly in Achav and Josiah, there found expression the two forces of Joseph and Judah, or put differently, Messiah, son of Joseph, and Messiah, son of David. Once this distortion, whereby the nation failed to make proper use of the energies revealed in the gifted few, is removed, at the end of days, the realization is reached that it is possible to unite these two powers. So the lamentation is a double lamentation for both Achav and Josiah together. As distant as they were in actuality, so is the potential for their closeness and interdependence. The purpose of the lamentation is to learn from the mistakes of the past in order to rectify toward the future, to study how to integrate the powers into a unified system that contributes to the general welfare.
This is his dream. Okay, bevakasha.
Now the truth is, so long as the nation is fractured and incapable of uniting the powers, at times an attempt at unification will actually result in some theological or moral damage. This deep separation is the source of controversy in Israel, that to which the prophet Zechariah only alluded. Jonathan ben Uziel paraphrased in Aramaic and made manifest, whereupon the land of Israel shook for an area of 400 square parasangs.
He's referring here to what he wrote about at the very beginning of the essay, which we read last week.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
In a generation unprepared for uniting these two tendencies, bringing them together produces a short circuit. Undaunted, Jonathan ben Uziel declared, "It is known to you that I did this neither for my glory, nor for the glory of my Father's house, but only that controversy not proliferate in Israel. Through the door of intellect lies the way to unify these two resources, both of which are indispensable. Solutions must be found."
Okay, and now we're really at the climax. Yes. Rav Kook tries to find a place for intellect. He was not an intellectualist, meaning he didn't think the intellect is the most important thing or the sole value, like the Rambam, but he does think the intellect is very important. And here, the role of the intellect is to open the path for the reconciliation between these two opposite tendencies. Yes, he speaks a lot of ethics, for sure. Even has a book on ethics. Okay. Bevakasha Elisheva.
The Zionist vision manifest in our generation might best be symbolized as the footstep of Messiah, son of Joseph.
Ikva de
Zionist,
the
what?
phrase Ikvita de Mashiach, it's an important phrase. The footsteps of the Messiah. It's a rabbinic phrase that's often used in a religious Zionist discourse. Here he uses it in a way that's rare. It's not the footsteps of the Messiah, he paraphrases it. The footsteps of the Messiah, son of Joseph. The footsteps of the physical redemption. That's what Zionism has been so far.
Zionism tends to universalism as opposed to Jewish particularism. It is unequipped to realize that the development of Israel's general aspect is but the foundation for Israel's singularity. The leadership of the Zionist movement must be greatly influenced by the gifted few of the generation, the righteous and the sages of Israel. On the other hand, the ideal of Israel's national renaissance, or in this spelling, renaissance, including all the material accoutrement, which is a proper thing when joined to the spiritual goal, to date has not succeeded, and the lack of success has brought on infighting, until finally the leader of the movement has fallen, a victim of frustration.
Even the universal physical side has been stymied. Okay. Oh, you see the note here, by the way. Okay. Herzl died suddenly at a young age. Okay.
It behooves us to take to heart, to try to unify the tree of Joseph and the tree of Judah, to rejoice in the national reawakening, and to know that this is not the end goal of Israel, but only a preparation.
What he refers to here is as perhaps the most beautiful chapter of Ezekiel. If I'm not mistaken, it's right after the dry bones, right before it or right after it. I think right after it, where Ezekiel talks about these two trees that they will become as one tree. For Rav Kook, these two trees symbolize, right, secular Zionism and Torah. And they really need, or the people that follow the two of them, they need to become one tree in the metaphor of Ezekiel. Okay, if this, yeah?
If this preparation will not submit to the spiritual aspect, if it will not aspire to it, then it is of no more value than the kingdom of Ephraim, a cake readily devoured, because they abandoned the source of living waters, and to Egypt did they call hither, to Assyria did they go.
This is very important. You had the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, right? This divisiveness existed even in First Temple times. And the northern kingdom was conquered and lost. Okay, they've been lost to us. What he's saying is that a completely secular Zionism that only remains secular will be lost to the Jewish people, just like the kingdom of Israel was lost. Okay?
This is the benefit to be gained by remorse over one whom we might consider the footstep of Messiah, son of Joseph. I won't read the Hebrew. In view of his influence in revitalizing the nation materially and generally. This power should not be abandoned, despite the wantonness and hatred of Torah that results in the expulsion of God-fearing Jews from the movement. We must develop the courage to seek that any power that is of itself good be fortified. And if it is lacking spiritual perfection, let us strive to increase the light of knowledge and fear of the Lord, such that it, that is the light, is capable of conquering a powerful life force and of being built up through it. Then there will be fulfilled in us the prophecy, I will grant unto Zion salvation, unto Israel my glory.
Okay, two things here. The wantonness and the hatred of Torah that results from the expulsion of God-fearing Jews from the movement. Now, there were God-fearing Jews in the Zionist movement. It's hard to get to the exact nuance of either of what he means or of what the reality was. Were religious Jews ever expelled from the Zionist movement? To the best of my knowledge, that did not happen. And yet, to traditional Jews, just the existence of the pork eaters on Yom Kippur in the movement might have been enough for them to feel that, this movement has no place for us. Okay, and each side may see the other as expelling it. Finally, the light of knowledge and fear of the Lord, and the light is capable of conquering a powerful life force and being built up through it. We're going to talk a little more about light and a little more even about sparks coming up as soon as we finish this essay. We're almost done. And we're going to talk about Rav Kook as a mystic. He's the sixth of our 6 great Jewish mystics. The things you've been reading about here may not seem so mystical to you. I mean, to talk about the Jews as being divided between this worldly Jews and the spiritual Jews, whether you agree with it or not, it may not seem like such a mystical idea. But we're going to see that it is. And we're going to see that Rav Kook builds not just a philosophy, but a philosophical mechanism that can always work, including today, okay, based on Kabbalistic ideas that are hidden in this eulogy that we're reading right now. First, let's finish the text. Go ahead.
Return, tshuva, must be from our side. Return will be enduring only if all the powers presently found and possible to be found in the nation will be vigorous and directed to good. Then we will be a vessel for the divine will, a crown of ornament in the hand of the Lord, and a royal diadem in the palm of your God.
That again is his dream. Okay.
Rav Yosef, who said that he penetrated the meaning of the verse in Zechariah only through its Aramaic translation, willingly accepted upon himself to witness the birth pangs of Messiah. When other sages said, let him, Messiah, come, and may I not see him, it was Rav Yosef who said, let him come, and may I merit to sit in the shadow of the dung of his donkey.
Okay, this is a Talmudic debate about whether it's a good thing to live in the pre-messianic age, meaning to go through what will happen in order for the Messiah to come. The other sages said, let him come and may I not see him, right? I'd rather not live when the Messiah comes because the times will be so troubled on the way. But Rav Yosef said no. The same Rav Yosef who understood the revealed secret, let him come no matter what my circumstances will be, even if I have to sit in the shadow of the dung of his donkey, of the Messiah's donkey. Okay.
It's also a way of saying, even if that's the closest I can get, it's still good.
Yep.
It's the other sages were daunted by the intensity of the spiritual birth pangs that would perforce result from the pressing demands to fortify the material side that had been neglected in the course of the exile. Exile came primarily to preserve and enhance the spiritual, to close up the transgression, and to make an end of sins.
This is something I intended to mention earlier when we were speaking. Somehow I missed it. He talked about exile also earlier as a time when the spiritual dominates. He's really talking about something very historical, okay? And also something to a large degree very Christian, okay? The Middle Ages, not just in Christendom, also in Islam, but especially in Christendom, were symbolic of the divorce between this world and the next world, between the spiritual and the physical. Okay, it's right straight at the roots of Christianity. If you read the Gospel of Matthew 22, I believe, okay, you have there where Jesus famously says, "Render unto Caesar." You need the story for it. The Pharisees give Jesus a coin, okay, and on the coin is a picture of the Caesar, and they want to trap him. They're trying to entrap him, and they say, should one pay taxes? On the one hand, the Roman government is corrupt and evil, and it's wrong to give them money. On the other hand, we know that you are a man of truth who would never do anything just out of pretense. So will you pay taxes to the Romans? So, and they brought, by the way, representatives of Herod. So if Jesus says, I won't pay taxes, the representatives of Herod will kill him. And if Jesus says, I will pay taxes, right, then he's a hypocrite because he's not doing only that which is just and right. He's paying taxes to the tyrants, okay? So Jesus takes a coin and says, what picture is on the coin? It's a picture of Caesar. And he famously says, render unto Caesar that which belongs to Caesar, and render unto God that which belongs to God. This isn't just a verse, a famous verse in the New Testament. This is something that became a foundation for all of Christian civilization. That there are two realms. There's the realm of Caesar. It's what Rav Kook is calling here the Messiah, son of Joseph. And there's the realm of the Lord, okay? It's what Rav Kook is calling here Torah. And Jesus is saying that these two realms have nothing to do with each other. Which realm is more important for Jesus? Obviously, the spiritual, right? Render unto Caesar all of his coins, meaning deprive yourself in this world of material well-being. It's really not important. The important thing is to render unto the Lord what belongs to the Lord. The important thing, and you see this throughout the Gospels, is the kingdom of heaven, not the kingdom of Caesar. The kingdom of Caesar and the kingdom of heaven are two different kingdoms that cannot exist at once. One of them is ultimately unimportant, That's the kingdom of Caesar. And one of them ultimately is of sole importance, and that is the kingdom of heaven. This idea reverberated throughout the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages were the time of the absolute divorce between this world and the next world. Okay? And millions of Christian peasants throughout the Middle Ages, what were they told by their priests? Yes, you're suffering, but it's not important. You're suffering in Caesar's world, right? You're suffering under the rule of the local autocrat or the local king. What's important is to have faith, because when it comes to the world, the kingdom of heaven, right? There you will be on top. Okay? Rav Kook is rebelling against all of this. The Jews lived among the Christians. And even if in Islam it was maybe less ideological, nonetheless, also in Islam, right, the realm of the Lord was declared at least to be more important. And the Jews live in these societies where there's a complete bifurcation between body and soul, between this world and the next world. Only the soul is important, not the body. Only the next world is important, not this world. Okay? The Jews lived in that. And the Jews, Rav Kook understands, absorbed that. Okay, and Rav Kook feels that this is alien to Torah, right? He was aware that this is very much a Christian idea and very much not, at least in the roots of the Jewish tradition, not part of the Jewish tradition. Okay, you know, there are elements in the Jewish tradition that say things like this, but Rav Kook sensed somewhat the alienness of it. And Rav Kook is arguing the exact opposite, okay? The material side that had been neglected in the course of exile, okay? You're exiled, and you're living in a world where the kingdom of Caesar and the kingdom of heaven are opposites. And all you really have is the kingdom of heaven, okay? He wants to end this. He wants this. And he thinks that the radicalness of secular Zionism, as opposed to religious Zionism, which would combine Zionism with tradition, he sees that as a result of exile. Now let's go on.
The shadow of the dung of his donkey. The word hamoreh, his donkey, by a double entendre, refers to the material Homer. Customarily, devotion to the material affairs of the nation clouds spiritual ascent. Even so, if this movement would not be so audacious as to spread in a way unbecoming Israel, excuse me, it would be easy to accept. Were it not for its extremism, the movement would not find oppressive the spirit of the Torah, and it would not attack the foundation of Torah, which is tantamount to blinding the eye of the world. But the dung, the gross tendencies that are loathsome to all peoples, produce a shadow that dims the pure intellectual lights deriving from Torah.
You see how he explains the dung of the donkey of the Messiah? The Messiah, son of David, has a donkey. The donkey, Hamor, represents physicality, Homer. Okay? Homer is good. You need Homer. Okay? But, you know, there's dung from the donkey, meaning there's all kinds of, coarse, uncouth, kinds of behavior and kinds of ways of looking at things that are awful in this worldly side. And Rabbi Yosef is saying, even if I have to put up with that, it's still worth seeing the Messiah come. Okay?
I've lost track of where I am.
Nonetheless.
Nonetheless, Rav Yosef was confident that eventually all these negative manifestations would surrender to the light of Torah and the knowledge of God. Rav Yosef will sit in the shadow of the dung of Messiah's donkey, in the very midst of the darkness of the shadow, rendering like night in the midst of the noonday. Rav Yosef will light the candle of the commandment and the light of Torah, and a little light dispels much darkness. The evil will be transformed into good, the curse into blessing.
The evil will be transformed into good, the curse into blessing. There is even good within evil. If that's not Lurianic Kabbalah, I don't know what is. We'll talk about that more right after we finish the essay, which is right here. Go ahead. And notice he cites the Zohar at the end of the eulogy.
This is the import of the cryptic passage in the Zohar. The head of the academy in the place of Messiah said,
The palace.
Hmm?
The head of the academy in the palace of the Messiah.
Oh, in the palace of Messiah said, whoever does not transform darkness to light and bitterness to sweetness may not enter here.
Think about what he means in context. The academy is a yeshiva. There's a yeshiva in the palace of the Messiah. Now, Rav Kook knows that in Jerusalem there are lots and lots of yeshiva students and lots of yeshiva teachers. But their yeshiva ain't going to be in the palace of the Messiah unless they can learn to transform darkness to light and bitterness to sweetness. Unless you can take awful things like rebellion against the Torah and turn them into something good, then you have no place in the palace of the Messiah. Okay?
The prerequisite for the generation of Messiah is the ability to utilize all forces, even the most coarse, for the sake of good and the singular sanctity with which Israel were crowned.
Okay. Let's stop here. I mean, we have to stop here. It's the end of the text. And talk just for a moment to remind you of a certain basic idea in Lurianic Kabbalah. It's something you've heard, but it's appropriate right here. And that will help us see what Rav Kook was doing underneath, like what led him to eulogize Herzl in this way, and how Rav Kook's ideas can be relevant in every single generation, including our own. Okay? The Lurianic idea, the Kabbalistic idea is this. Okay? It's the idea of where God wants to love. To love, you need an other. But God is everywhere. There's no other. So God contracts himself, creates a vacuum where God is not found. That vacuum, that godless vacuum, is our physical universe. Now, God can do kindness to something, to someone. To this non-godly physical universe, he can give something. So God decides to provide it with his light. Okay? And he sends a lamp into this vacuum, into this godless vacuum. But the light is too powerful for the lamp. The lamp shatters, and the various shards contain sparks from the original light, from the original flame that God sent in. The only way to redeem the situation is to take these evil shards of chomriyut, of physicality, and elevate the sparks that they contain. Okay, that is how to finish God's intended act of love. Okay, we're in the midst of it. We're in the midst of trying to finish God's intended act of love. How does that fit into what we read here from Rav Kook? Well, let's first take the example at hand. Okay, the example at hand is secular Zionism. Secular Zionism, to the mind of Rav Kook, contains abominations, awful things. Jews rebelling against the Torah. Understand, this is not just Jews who are not keeping the Torah. This is not just a Jew who, whatever, walks into a non-kosher restaurant. That's not what he's talking about. Okay, that's bad enough in the eyes of Rav Kook. Okay, but that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about Jews who willingly and purposely and publicly, right, create and live according to an ideology where a Jew must reject tradition, where a Jew must throw it in the trash, where if you're traditional, you're not a good enough Jew. Okay? Where being traditional or keeping commandments is primitive and lowly and it's even despicable to a certain degree. Okay? And this is an ideology of rebellion against the Torah. I'm sure you've all heard the idea of the new Jew. Okay? Zionism, secular Zionism, was out to create a new Jew, not the weak, timid, cowardly, non-productive, religious Jew of the exile, but rather the productive, strong, positive, building, secular Jew of the Zionist movement. Okay, this is the kind of view that he, in his eyes, this truly contains abominations. And yet, it's not just abominations. Because inside those abominations are the sparks of God. Where is God at the pork feast on Yom Kippur? Where is he? Well, if the pork feast on Yom Kippur is being held on a kibbutz, then God is there. Because what have these people done? They may be eating pork on Yom Kippur and doing it like this, okay, ideologically, and yet they are building a new Jewish town in the land of Israel. And all those Jews who are fasting on Yom Kippur and who would never touch a piece of pork, they're sitting in Europe. They're not building any Jewish towns in Eretz Israel. Okay? There are sparks of light in the midst of the abominations, and those same sparks are not found in the halls of Torah. Now we'll get that. That'll bring us back to last week. I left you off last week with the idea that according to Rav Kook is like the doctor, and the Torah is like the patient. The doctor has to give a diagnosis about the patient. And Rav Kook's diagnosis was that the Torah is very, very ill. The Torah is diseased. The Torah is crippled. Okay? Why? How can you even understand a traditional rabbi thinking in such terms? But it goes back to exactly what we're talking now. Let's say you, God forbid, took a person and you strapped the person to a bed for years on end. What happens to the person's muscles? They waste away, they atrophy. And the person, even if you feed the person well, the person won't be healthy. The person will probably eventually die. Okay? That is what Rav Kook says happened to the Torah over 2,000 years of exile. That is what happened. The Torah atrophied. I mean, the Torah was fed. The Torah got some nutrition. People studied Torah and people kept some mitzvot. But there are so many mitzvot that were not kept and were not studied and were not developed for 2,000 years. The Torah conceives of a country with towns and cities and courts and kings and an army and an economy, a Jewish economy. And all of that did not exist for 2,000 years. All of those muscles of the Torah atrophied. Okay, Brian has a question. But Brian says that so many rules, so many commandments of the Torah are only in the land of Israel. Most people think of the agricultural laws. That's true, but it encompasses everything that is meant by statehood. Everything, all of statehood is in the Torah, or should have been in the Torah, but it was lacking for 2,000 years. So the Torah got sick. Now I'm going to do what? It's being suggested that the coronavirus is a wake-up message. Maybe the Torah got the coronavirus. I don't know. Okay. I want another question. Yeah. The people, but the Torah lives through, the suggestion was maybe it's not the Torah that is sick, but the people studying Torah that's sick. I think that even has a basis in Rav Kook's text. And yet the Torah lives through the people who study it and keep it. And the people who studied it and keep it didn't keep anything or nearly anything connected to statehood for 2,000 years. Okay, now to bring it home, okay, by describing the dynamic that's going on. Not specifically the dynamic of secular Zionism, but rather a dynamic that can occur and recur in many different circumstances and in many different ways. The example here in this text that we read is secular Zionism. Let's see how the dynamic works for secular Zionism. Okay, the Jewish people is sick from 2,000 years of exile. The Torah is atrophied through 2,000 years of exile. When a person is sick, usually the person tries to get help. The person tries to find a solution, to find a medicine, to find an exercise, to find a diet, to find some way to get better, to find a good doctor, right? To find some way to get better. What Rav Kook is saying is that a lot of Jews were not only sick, but they knew that they were sick. They reached a diagnosis, I shouldn't call it a diagnosis, but they knew that something was wrong. They knew that they were sick. They knew that they were not healthy. They looked at all their fellow Jews in Europe with their communities and synagogues and yeshivot and said, where is our country? They looked at these people, saw that they were sick, and said, the Torah is a sick thing. If I want to be a healthy Jew, then I need to leave this primitive Torah and become a modern Jew. What does a modern Jew do? A modern Jew stands up on his or her 2 feet with pride and builds a country, just like the Germans did, just like the French did. That's what the Jews need to do, okay? The Germans and French aren't sick. They're healthy. They built their countries. The Jews of Europe are sick. They're not building any country at all. In fact, they're building other people's countries. So what we need to do to get healthy, these Jews said, is leave behind this sick Jewish people with its sick Torah, okay, and stand on our 2 feet and become healthy Jews that build a nation, build a country. And Rav Kook says that these people who came to this conclusion, they came to the conclusion, you know, there's dung there, there's physicality there, and yet the motivation is a spark of God. There is a spark of God that was missing in the Torah for 2,000 years, and that is statehood. And these people knew that it was unhealthy. So they rebelled against the Torah that they saw and went in a new direction. Okay. What, in that case, does secular Zionism achieve on a spiritual level? It brings that spark of God, which we're going to now call statehood, back into the Torah. Okay? You have, I mean, it relates to what you said. You have the ideal Torah, the full Torah, and you have the real Torah, meaning how people study it and how people live it. The real Torah, this world Torah, is bereft of statehood. These secular Zionists realize that that's sick, so they go take statehood, rebel against the Torah, but they're still Jews. They're still part of the Jewish people. So the Jewish people are invigorated by the Jewish people as a whole is invigorated by the secular Zionist movement. And the secular Zionist movement even has the function of bringing this divine spark back into the Torah, because they remain Jews and because they fight for Jewish statehood. And what that will eventually lead to, says Rav Kook, once the secular Zionists realize that these things were part of the Torah and should be part of the Torah, and once the traditional Jews realize that the secular Zionists carried a spark of God, once that happens, then the Jewish people becomes whole and the Torah becomes whole, because the Torah, which was lacking statehood for 2,000 years, now has statehood again. The Torah is now again full. That's the dynamic that he's describing. What I shall do is show you a chart which exhibits this, which means that I need to find how to do a different share. Hold on. I can't find where the stop share. Oh, here's stop share. Okay. Stop share and now share screen. And I will share with you a chart. Okay. I apologize, the chart is in Hebrew. Okay. I originally hoped there would be a whiteboard to do it in English, but I'll explain what this means in English. Okay. You have boxes and arrows. You also have circles, and what this is a spark, like the sparks of the Lurianic Kabbalah. Okay? This says in Hebrew, Aleph. I think you can at least understand the letters. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. Okay, that shows a sequence. I need to reduce this just a drop, and then you can see the full sequence. The sequence is Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. Aleph is Yahadut Yameinu, which literally means today's Judaism. Judaism right now, okay, as it is right now. Instead of using Judaism, which I don't like the word so much, I'm going to use Torah. Today's Torah, that's Aleph. Today's Torah is a circle which is missing a
Spark.
Okay, it does not contain the spark of statehood. Bet In Hebrew, it says Rayon Zar, a foreign idea. By foreign idea, it means non-Jewish. Okay, a non-Jewish idea. What is the non-Jewish idea we've dealt with so far? 19th century European nationalism. That was a non-Jewish idea. Okay, the Aviv Ha'amim, how do you say that in English? The springtime of the nations. Right, there's a better phrase for that. The 19th century were all these European nationalisms, right? It's connected to the Enlightenment, but it's not the Enlightenment. What? Okay. Listen, national, but there's a phrase, a really cool phrase. It doesn't matter. Okay, so we have a foreign idea, which is European nationalism. European nationalism is a foreign Torah. Okay, a foreign Torah with the spark, but it's foreign. It's not ours, not Jewish. Okay, so these Jews, these young Jews in the late 19th century looked around in Germany and Austria-Hungary and France and Britain, and they say, all of these people built their countries. We as Jews need to build our country. It's a non-Jewish idea, and it's right for the Jews too. That's what the secular Zionists say. So the secular Zionists bring this spark, this divine godly spark. See that? European nationalism is a spark of God. Okay? And they bring it into the conceptual Yahadut Mushlemet, the full, perfect Torah, which is only theoretical, it's not actual yet. That, in turn, you see this arrow here, affects the Torah of today, and it leads us to the Torah of tomorrow. The Torah of tomorrow, which is Dalet, is a Jewish circle which contains the spark of statehood. And if you think about it, it came true historically. Rav Kook didn't live to see it, but it came true historically right now. We're living in this reality. We're living in a reality where Torah today is conceived by so many Jews in Israel, including plenty of Haredim, by the way, as including the spark of peoplehood and nationhood and statehood. Okay, for so many traditional Jews today, it's obvious that the Torah includes those things. But it wasn't obvious in the 19th century. In the 19th century, the Orthodox Jews of Munich, along with the Reform Jews, said, ain't gonna be no Zionist Congress here. And the traditional Jews of Eastern Europe, the rabbis all said, don't be Zionist. Zionism is a rebellion against the Torah. Right? Torah is spiritual. It doesn't include European statehood. That was this. That was the Torah of today, say in 1930. The Torah of today in 2020 already includes statehood. Okay? That is the dynamic that Rav Kook used when he confronted secular Zionism. Okay, and the foreign element in the dynamic is European nationalism. Okay, now let's take another element, one which Rav Kook was familiar with and talks about to a degree. A great many Jews in Rav Kook's time were not traditionalists or Orthodox or Reform or secular Zionists. In fact, until the Holocaust, perhaps the most promising Jewish movement for the future, which seemed to be like the wave of the future, and which hardly exists today, we've almost forgotten about it, was Jewish communism. Anybody remember Jewish communists? Okay,
Yep.
before the Holocaust, that was perhaps a bigger movement than Zionism and Orthodoxy and Reform. Okay, somebody's father here, okay, was a Jewish communist. Now, communism, okay, communism is also a rebellion against tradition. It's a war against religion. It's a war against the Jews or Judaism, okay, and communism also, just like secular Zionism. Does communism have any divine spark in it? Not very obvious. It looks so bad, huh? When you look back.
Can you show please the bottom of that image?
Hold on, let Jennifer speak for a moment, yes?
Can you show please the bottom of that image?
Well, 1 second, Simcha. Jennifer, yeah. Very nice. Okay. So Jennifer says that communism was about resolving social evils, okay? Huge disparities in wealth and power, and people, the wealthy abusing the poor, and equality, okay? Perhaps that is the spark in communism. Simcha? Go ahead.
If you can show the bottom of the image, please.
Roll it up so you can see the bottom.
Oh, that's all you wanted to say? Okay.
Yeah.
The left side is not complete.
No, that's okay. I don't think
So
you really. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all you wanted to say, Simcha?
Yes.
Yes, want to see the whole thing.
You're
Put it up so
copying.
you can see this whole.
You're copying the chart in English. Oh, in Hebrew or in English?
Hebrew.
Just raise it up a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, I sent down the link. I'll put the link on the WhatsApp. Now, so we see a dynamic for nationalism. We see a dynamic for possible dynamic for socialism or communism. Remember that so many secular Zionists were socialists or Zionists. And Rav Kook was very familiar with these people, okay? Here too, even though it's a rebellion against the Torah, there is a spark of God in it. You can have the exact same dynamic. In the previous today's Judaism, said the 19th century, there was vast economic disparity between Jews, and abuse came out of that, and all kinds of social ills. So the young Jews look around and they see Karl Marx, who was actually Jewish, all right. They see socialism, okay, and socialist movements. And they say, we as Jews need these values. Let's leave the Torah in favor of these values. But if they remain Jews and they devote themselves to Yiddish literature, okay, they remain Jews, they thus bring the idea into the perfect full conception of the Torah, which influences the real life, okay, side of Torah, and leads us to a future real life Torah that will include these sparks of social justice and equality and all kinds of ideologies and phrases that we also hear a lot about very often today and in recent years. So we have that. Now let's bring this closer to home, okay? To an area that Rav Kook, it's impossible to say that he didn't deal with it at all, but it is possible to say that he dealt with it in a way that didn't seem to touch the dynamic, okay? At some point, I don't remember what year it was, but at some point, a big issue came up in the Yishuv, in the Jewish community under the British Mandate. The question that came up was something that came up in America, it came up in Britain, it came up in many countries. The right, I don't want to use the right here, but the legality, or should it be legal for women to vote? And you're thinking, what does that have to do with all of this? But it does. Rav Kook did not apply the dynamic to that. Rav Kook actually came out against giving women the vote. Okay, Rav Kook felt that it violated the character of a woman. Okay, to be involved in political ich. Okay, and yet, and this also shows you how much things have changed. Rav Kook's position was rejected not only by the Zionist movement as a whole, his position was also rejected by the religious Zionist movement of his time. Okay, they rejected the opinion of Rav Kook, and they supported giving the vote to women. So since British Mandate times, women in the Zionist movement, in Zionist what you call it, the Zionist population, okay, had the right to vote against the opinion of Rav Kook and many in the, I would assume most, okay, in the old Yishuv in Jerusalem. Now, could we apply the same dynamic to that? Even though Rav Kook didn't. Let's think about it. Who can do it on their own? Who can apply the dynamic? Well, we have the Judaism of Rav Kook's time, right? Women have far less opportunity than men, and many times they're at the mercy of their situation. Okay? There you have it. That's Aleph. A foreign idea occurs, which we nowadays call feminism. Okay? Feminism is not a Jewish idea, even though lots of Jewish women, probably men, were involved in it. Okay? Feminism is a universal idea. Okay? So here we have a foreign idea, and you have plenty of young Jews, especially I think maybe about the 1960s, 1970s, plenty of young Jews who don't want to have any truck with traditional Judaism where women are not equal or are not able to do things. And they look around at it and they say, hey, feminism is an attractive idea, a true idea, and it's opposed to traditionalism. So I leave behind the tradition and go to be a feminist. What does this do? If these Jewish feminists remain Jews, then it brings the spark into the idea of the full, perfect Torah, which influences the contemporary real-life Torah to bring us to a future Torah, okay, where the status of woman has been changed for the better. Okay? As to how to do that, of course, that's not the dynamic. That's a different kind of discussion. But the dynamic can be applied to many, many different things. Okay? Can anybody think of some other foreign universal idea that this dynamic can be applied to or has worked for in the past several generations?
Yes, civil rights.
Civil rights. I didn't see who said that.
It's Kayla. I can't turn on the
Kayla.
thing. I don't
Okay.
feel well.
So Kayla says civil rights, 1960s, that people should have be equal under the law, and that the law should how shall I say it? That the law should guarantee civil liberties. Okay. If you mention that, I mean, we can think of different ways it was brought in. You could think of Abraham Joshua Heschel marching with Martin Luther King. He's doing that as a Jew, right? So and therefore he brings it into the dynamic that we have described here. What occurred to me just now, another way to describe that is the Jewish reaction to the civil rights movements. Anybody remember what that was?
Very supportive.
No, I don't mean, no, that's not what I meant. Jews supported the civil rights movement, but there was also a Jewish result of the civil rights movement.
Oh, I don't know, but I was going to say the Torah includes a lot of civil rights.
It sure does. That's exactly, Rav Kook would say the Torah includes statehood. The Torah includes social justice, socialism, right? The Torah includes, that's the assumption behind all of this is that the sparks are divine sparks that are part of the Torah when the Torah is full and healthy. Now, what occurred to me as the Jewish result of the civil rights movement, the Soviet Jewry movement grew out of Jewish involvement in the civil rights movement. Okay, both in terms of, hey, we can protest, and also in terms of that our brothers have no civil rights. Okay, and so you bring it in, and eventually it has the potential to help topple the entire Soviet empire. So you can think of all kinds of things for which to use this dynamic. I really have to run because in Midreshet Hakerem I have to run for the bus. But before I go, besides saying goodbye, I also must give credit to the person who created this chart, who I learned this dynamic from. And there's also here, you have here the halakha on the one side and ethical sensitivity on the other side, okay? And different approaches towards, is it a conflict or not a conflict? You can look at that on your own with a little bit of Hebrew. And I must give credit to the person who created this. The person who created this is Rabbi Pinchas Polonsky, who is a result of the Soviet Jewry movement. He was a refusenik. He was in prison. And you can do that, okay?
What's his last name again?
Pinchas Polonsky. Polonsky. If you've seen the Hebrew-Russian Sidurim prayer books, he's the translator, okay? And he's very into the philosophy of Rav Kook. And there was a lecture that I heard from him that brought me to this whole description of the dynamic of how Rav Kook deals with foreign ideas and with rebellions that bring foreign ideas that are not really foreign, okay, back into the Torah. And he specifically, by the way, Polonsky specifically uses feminism as his this generation, okay, idea of how the dynamic might function. So have a great week. It was a pleasure to see you all physically or virtually, and I have to run. I apologize. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Avi.
For the whole course.
Great.
Thank you, Avi. Before everybody takes off, just a moment, I just want to make a quick announcement. We're going to be having a course in July. We're going to have a short mini course of four lessons with Avi on the Jewish Book of Character Traits. This is in the Hebrew it's called a Sefer Hamidot. Excuse me. Okay. We're gonna have a course mini course for lessons starting on July 1st with Avi, each again on Wednesday evening, same time. On the Sefer Midot, the Jewish Book of Character Traits. It's a shortened version of the course we gave in Hebrew almost 4 years ago. This course, however, we're going to be charging. All right, so there's going to be 100 shekels for non-members, 50 shekels for members. If you want to join on Zoom, you're going to have to register in advance. There'll be an announcement on email and on WhatsApp. The course is four lessons, and then we'll start in July 1st. So thank you all for participating.
Okay. May I, before we go?
Yes.
You know what I'm going to say. Don't forget the Women's Study Day is coming up a week from Friday. And I don't know about this timing for you, Simcha. It's going to be a ridiculous hour for you. But it's like from 1:30 in the afternoon till 5:30 and all on Zoom. The choices are great in 4 languages, as usual. And the link is in the email and in the announcements. And if you don't, if you have a problem, let me know. And please sign up for it. Also, even though it's on Zoom and we don't have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to get the bus, which is nice, but it still costs money for all the lectures and so forth. So if you can there's a place to give a donation also. So please register, come.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
That'll be about 5:30 in the morning for you.
That's right. Okay.
I already registered, Mario.
Call